Imagine discovering that a powerful homeowners association has secretly built $1 million stadium on your family's sacred farmland, without your knowledge. But what if the one secret weapon you hold could trap them in their own trap, with no way in or out? They built $1 million stadium on my family farm without permission, thinking I'd just roll over and take it. But what happens when they discover I own the only road leading to their precious new venue? I never wanted trouble, just wanted to be left alone with my chickens, my old red tractor, and the memories of Grandpa Joe on this farm he loved so much. The paperwork transferring his 15 acres to me still sat on my kitchen table 3 years after he passed. I'm not one for paperwork. I'm more comfortable with dirt under my fingernails and sweat on my brow. Those chickens are making noise again. I looked up from fixing my fence to see a woman in pressed khaki pants and a polo shirt stomping across my front yard. She had short blonde hair styled perfectly, expensive sunglasses pushed up on her head, and a clipboard clutched in her manicured hands like a weapon. "Morning to you too," I said, pulling off my work gloves. "Those chickens have been here longer than you have. And you are?" "Karen Thompson, president of the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association." She pointed toward the fancy new houses that had sprung up across the road last year. "Your animals are violating our noise ordinance, and frankly, this entire—" She waved her hand dismissively at my barn. "Situation is bringing down property values." I couldn't help but laugh. "Ma'am, this is a working farm, has been for 60 years. Your HOA rules don't apply to my property." Karen's face pinched like she'd bitten into a lemon. "We'll see about that. The community has standards now." As she marched back to her shiny SUV, my neighbor Maria called from over her fence, "Don't let her bully you, Sam. Those Oak Ridge people think they own everything now." Maria had lived next door for 20 years. Unlike the Oak Ridge folks, she understood farm life. Her vegetable garden was legendary in the county. "She can try," I said, waving, but something about Karen's confidence bothered me. The next day, a letter arrived with the Oak Ridge Estates logo, a formal complaint about my unsightly farm equipment visible from the road. I tossed it in my junk drawer and went about my business. But the harassment didn't stop. 3 more letters arrived that week. Then Karen showed up again, this time with photos of my barn, claiming its peeling paint violated community standards. "Again, your HOA has no jurisdiction over my property," I explained, trying to stay patient. "This land isn't part of Oak Ridge Estates." "Actually," Karen smiled thinly, "there's some question about that. The original property lines in this area are quite unclear." A chill ran through me despite the warm spring day. My family's owned this land for 3 generations. "There's no question about anything," Karen just smiled wider. "We'll see." That evening, I dug through Grandpa's old file cabinet. Finding the original deed from 1962, everything looked in order. But I wasn't a lawyer. Maybe I should talk to one just to be safe. The next morning, I woke to the sound of engines. Looking out my bedroom window, I spotted 3 trucks with the Oak Ridge Estates logo parked along my east pasture where my cows grazed. Men in hard hats were walking around with equipment. I threw on clothes and ran outside, my heart pounding. "Hey, what are you doing on my property?" A man with a clipboard stepped forward. "Morning, sir. We're just doing some preliminary surveying for the council." "What council? And why are you on my land without permission?" The man looked uncomfortable. "You'll have to talk to the HOA about that. We're just doing our job." "Well, your job is trespassing. Please leave now." They packed up quickly enough, but not before I noticed they'd placed small orange flags in a strange pattern across my pasture. The field where my grandfather had taught me to drive a tractor, where I now grew alfalfa for my livestock. I called Maria immediately. "Something weird is happening. The HOA sent surveyors to my east pasture." "That's not right," Maria said. "My husband Tom works at the county office. He's never mentioned any official surveys around here." "Let me ask him." Later that afternoon, Tom came by with troubling news. There's a proposal that was quietly submitted to the Town Planning Committee last month. Something big involving your property. But it's all very hush-hush. The only name I saw was Karen Thompson as the contact. My stomach nodded. Can you find out more? I'll try, but these documents are oddly restricted. Never seen anything like it. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., I grabbed a flashlight and walked out to the pasture. The surveyor flags formed a huge rectangle, nearly half my pasture. What could they possibly want with my land? As I turned to head back, my flashlight caught something metal gleaming in the grass. I picked it up. A business card for Midwest Stadium Development Company Stadium on my farm. The next morning, I drove straight to the town hall to demand answers, but the clerk said all planning meetings had been moved to evening times for better community attendance. Back at the farm, I found a notice taped to my door. Town meeting tonight, 7 p.m. Discussion of community improvements. I called Maria immediately. Something's happening tonight at the town meeting. Can you come? Absolutely. Tom says there's strange money being thrown around town lately. Officials suddenly getting new cars, taking vacations. When I hung up, I noticed a sleek black car parked at the end of my driveway. Inside sat Karen talking on her phone while staring directly at my house. When she saw me looking, she smiled and drove away. My grandfather always said, "Land is the one thing they ain't making more of, so hold tight to what you've got." As I looked across my pasture with its mysterious flags, I knew he was right. I spent the afternoon reviewing every document I had on the property, then loaded them into a folder to take to the meeting. Whatever game Karen and her HOA were playing, I wouldn't let them take what was mine. As the sun began to set, I looked out at my farm one last time before heading to town. My chickens clucked contentedly. My old dog, Rusty, dozed on the porch, and my cows grazed peacefully in the west pasture. Would my quiet life still exist tomorrow? I slammed my truck door and raced into the town meeting, already 15 minutes late. Something felt wrong when I spotted Karen and her HOA buddies sitting in a neat row up front, all wearing matching blue Oak Ridge Estates polo shirts. Mayor Roberts stood at the podium. Pointing at a giant screen, my heart stopped. There on display was my east pasture, where my cows grazed every morning, transformed into a massive stadium with parking lots. As you can see, Mayor Roberts beamed, the new Oak Ridge Community Stadium will seat 5,000 people and host everything from high school football to summer concerts. The crowd clapped while I struggled to breathe. My fingers dug into the back of the chair in front of me. "Wait!" I shouted, my voice cracking. "That's my land you're showing on that screen." Every head in the room turned toward me. Karen's smile never faltered as she stood up smoothly. "The HOA is proud to donate this parcel for community use," she announced, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "It's what good neighbors do." I pushed through the crowd to the front. "Donate? You can't donate what you don't own. That land has been in my family for 3 generations." Mayor Roberts looked uncomfortable. "There seems to be some confusion. The paperwork clearly shows this parcel belongs to Oak Ridge Estates." Karen produced a thick folder. "Perhaps you haven't seen the updated survey? This section was legally determined to be part of our development 2 years ago." "That's impossible," I said. Grabbing the papers, the maps looked official with stamps and signatures, but something wasn't right. The boundary line cut straight through my grandfather's old oak tree, the tree he'd specifically planted to mark our property line. "This is fake," I whispered. Then louder, "This is fake!" Karen's smile tightened. "Please don't make a scene. The boundary dispute was settled before you even inherited the property." People began whispering. I felt dizzy with rage and confusion. My neighbor Maria appeared beside me. "I've lived next to that farm for 30 years, she announced loudly. "That land has always belonged to the Miller family." Karen's eyes narrowed. "With all due respect, memories can be faulty. Legal documents don't lie." The meeting continued while I stood frozen, clutching the falsified survey. The HOA members presented their stadium plans. Concession stands where my apple trees grew. A parking lot over the pond my grandfather dug by hand. Construction begins next Monday, Mayor Roberts announced cheerfully. I stumbled outside into the cool night air, Maria following close behind. They can't just take your land, she insisted. There must be something you can do. I need to check the county records, I said. The original deeds will prove I'm right. The next morning, I skipped farm chores and drove straight to the county records office. Mrs. Jenkins, who'd worked there since I was a child, greeted me warmly. I need to see the original property records for my farm, I explained urgently. The HOA is trying to build a stadium on my east pasture. Her smile faded. That's strange. Someone from Oak Ridge was here yesterday asking about those same documents. My stomach twisted. Did you help them? Of course, but... She hesitated. Let me pull them up for you. She typed on her computer, frowning. That's odd. The file is marked as checked out for digitization. That wasn't scheduled. Who authorized that? I demanded. Let me see. She clicked through several screens. The request came directly from Mayor Roberts' office. I slammed my hand on the counter. They're hiding the original documents. Can't you see what's happening? Mrs. Jenkins looked alarmed. Please lower your voice. I can put in a request to expedite the return, but it might take a few days. I don't have a few days. They start building on Monday. I drove home in a panic. Calling every lawyer in the county, none could see me before next week. As I turned onto my road, I slammed on the brakes. 3 giant bulldozers sat at the edge of my pasture. Men in hard hats were placing stakes with orange ribbons across my field. I jumped out of my truck. Stop! What are you doing on my property? The foreman, a burly man with a weathered face, approached me. Ma'am, we're just marking the boundaries for Monday's excavation. This is private property, I insisted. You need to leave now. He pulled out a work order. We have all the proper permits signed by the mayor himself. Any property disputes need to go through the courts. I grabbed my phone to call the sheriff, but the screen showed no service, unusual for my area. Just then, a sleek black SUV pulled up. Karen stepped out in her spotless white pantsuit. Not a hair out of place. Is there a problem? She asked, her voice sickeningly sweet. You know damn well there's a problem, I hissed. You're stealing my land, she sighed dramatically for the benefit of the workers. Nobody's stealing anything. These boundary adjustments were legally recorded. Your grandfather agreed to them years ago. That's a lie. He would never. It's all in the paperwork, she interrupted. Besides, this stadium will be wonderful for the community. Your property values will skyrocket. You should be thanking us. The bulldozer engines roared to life. Panic rose in my chest as they began clearing a path through my fence line. I'll get a court order, I shouted over the noise. Karen's perfect smile never reached her eyes. By all means try, but judges tend to side with progress, not outdated farms. As the first fence post toppled, my phone buzzed with a text from Maria. Found something in my attic. Old photos of our properties from 30 years ago. The creek marks the boundary line. I looked up at the dried creek bed. Now completely within the area Karen claimed was HOA property. The bulldozers pushed forward, crushing wildflowers my grandmother had planted decades ago. A terrible thought hit me. What if I couldn't stop them? What if my family's legacy disappeared under concrete and stadium seats? But as I watched the construction vehicles lumber across my field, I noticed something odd. They all came in using my private access road, the very road my grandfather had built by hand to reach the back fields. Was it possible they hadn't included that in their land grab? If I owned the road, could I control who used it? As Karen chatted with the construction crew, I slipped away to my barn, buried in my grandfather's old metal filing cabinet. There had to be something that could save my farm. But would I find it before the bulldozers destroyed everything I loved? I slammed on my brakes, sending dust clouds billowing around my old pickup truck. The bulldozers were already tearing into my east pasture, ripping up the soil my family had farmed for 3 generations. My hand shook as I jumped out and ran toward the massive yellow machines. "Stop!" I screamed, waving my arms frantically. "This is my land. You can't do this." 2 workers looked at each other with confusion. One of them shut off his engine and climbed down. "Look, lady, I'm just doing what I'm paid to do," he said, pulling off his hard hat. "We've got all the proper permits right here." The construction foreman, a tall man with a weathered face, walked over and handed me a stack of papers. His name tag read, "Mike, you didn't look mean, just tired." "Everything signed by Mayor Roberts himself," Mike explained. "If there's a legal dispute, I can't help you. We're just following orders." I flipped through the papers with trembling fingers. There it was. Official permits allowing Oak Ridge Estates to build their stadium on what had always been my land. "This can't be legal," I whispered. A shiny black SUV pulled up beside my dusty truck. Karen stepped out wearing designer sunglasses and a smug smile that made my blood boil. "Having a little meltdown, are we?" she asked, crossing her arms. "I tried to warn you that fighting progress is pointless." "You know very well this land belongs to me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "What did you do, Karen?" "Forge documents, bribe officials." Her smile didn't waver. "Don't be so dramatic. The property line dispute was settled years ago. Not my fault if your grandfather never told you that this parcel legally belongs to Oak Ridge Estates." "That's a lie, is it?" She glanced at her diamond watch. "The bulldozers will continue tomorrow at 7 a.m. Sharp. Don't make a scene. It's embarrassing." She turned to the workers. "Carry on, gentlemen." As Karen drove away, Mike gave me a sympathetic look. "We're knocking off for today anyway, but we'll be back tomorrow unless you get some kind of court order." I sat in my truck for nearly an hour watching the construction crew pack up. My phone buzzed with a text from Maria. "You okay?" Saw the machines coming over with pizza and info. Maria had been my neighbor since we were kids. Her grandfather and mine had farmed side by side for decades. If anyone knew the truth about my property lines, it would be her family. That night, my kitchen table disappeared under old photographs, letters, and hand-drawn maps that Maria's grandfather had kept. "Look at this boundary line," she said, pointing to a creek bed visible in a yellowed photograph. "According to my grandfather's notes, this creek always marked where your property ended and the old Wilson land began. Land that later became Oak Ridge Estates." I squinted at the photo. "That creek dried up years ago." "Exactly. I think they're using that to their advantage. They've submitted altered surveys that ignore the original boundary markers." Maria's husband, Tom, who worked at the county clerk's office, called with disturbing news. "The original boundary documents are mysteriously misplaced," he said. "And guess who was the last person to request them? Jack Wilson, Karen's right-hand man at the HOA." My stomach twisted into knots. "They're stealing my land right in front of everyone, and nobody can stop them, not without proof." Tom agreed, and they've been careful. The next morning, I hired Sarah Jenkins, the toughest attorney in 3 counties. She filed for an emergency injunction to halt construction. "Don't get your hopes up," Sarah warned. "Judge Peterson will hear this case. And he plays golf with the mayor every Sunday." She was right. Judge Peterson denied our request, claiming insufficient evidence of ownership dispute and citing the community benefit of the new stadium. Construction accelerated after that. The HOA hired extra crews working through weekends, racing to finish before I could find proof of their deception. Each morning, I watched from my kitchen window as trucks and bulldozers invaded my property. Powerless to stop them, my farm felt smaller every day. Even my remaining land seemed tainted. As if Karen's influence was spreading like a disease. Couldn't sleep. I barely ate. The constant noise of construction drove me to the edge of breakdown. One particularly bad morning. After a night of no sleep, I sat on my porch with coffee, Watching the parade of construction vehicles rumble past, Karen had even sent a security guard to make sure I didn't interfere again. That's when something odd caught my eye. Every single vehicle, bulldozers, cement trucks, workers' cars, all used the narrow dirt road that cut through my west field to reach the construction site. My private road, I called Sarah immediately, my heart racing with a glimmer of hope. The access road, I said when she answered. They're all using my private road to reach the construction site. Was that road part of the disputed territory? I heard papers shuffling on the other end. Give me a minute to check the documents we do have. No, the access road wasn't part of any disputed territory. According to this original deed from 1952, that road is 100% yours. What does that mean legally? It means, Sarah said, and I could hear the smile in her voice, that you have the right to control who uses your private road. They need your permission to access that stadium, both during construction and after it's built. For the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of power return to me. Maybe I couldn't stop their stadium, but I could definitely control who reached it. How fast can you help me set up a gate? I asked. I'll be there in an hour with the paperwork and a friend who installs security gates. Sarah replied, Don't tip them off. Let me handle this properly so they can't claim you're acting in bad faith. As I hung up, I watched another cement truck rumble down my road. Completely unaware that their easy access was about to end, Karen thought she had won, but she'd overlooked something critical. What would happen when they finished building their $1 million stadium, only to find out they had no legal way to reach it? Couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard bulldozers tearing into my pasture at 3 a.m. I got up and spread all my property papers across the kitchen table. There had to be something I missed, some way to fight back against Karen and her HOA vultures. My fingers trembled as I unfolded the oldest map, yellowed with age. Grandpa had kept meticulous records of everything. As I traced the boundary lines for the 100th time, my eyes caught something I hadn't noticed before. The thin line marking the access road that cut from the main highway through my western field, leading straight to what was now their construction site. I grabbed my phone and called Sarah, my lawyer. Sarah, I know it's early, but I need you to check something right away. Who owns the road they're using to build the stadium? 3 hours later, Sarah's car kicked up dust as she raced up my driveway. She didn't even say hello, just burst through my front door, waving papers. You own it, she shouted, slapping the documents on my table. The access road was never part of any land dispute. It's 100% yours according to every deed since 1952, my heart pounded. Are you absolutely certain? Karen will fight this with everything she has. Sarah nodded, pointing to official stamps and signatures. The road was created by your grandfather specifically as a private farm access road. He never dedicated it to public use. The county has zero claim to it, and neither does Oak Ridge Estates. I walked outside and stared at the dirt road that construction trucks had been using every day. My road, my property, my rules. What exactly can I do with this information? I asked when Sarah joined me. Legally, you can restrict access immediately. It's like your driveway, private property. I spent the rest of the morning at the hardware store, buying the biggest gate I could find, along with heavy posts, concrete mix, and a massive chain and padlock. My neighbor Tom saw what I was doing and brought over his post hole digger and 4 of his friends. We've all had enough of Karen and her HOA nonsense, Tom said. Let's show them they can't just take whatever they want. By sunset, a sturdy metal gate blocked the road completely. I hammered in a large sign. Private property, no trespassing. At 6 a.m. the next morning, I sat in my truck, parked just behind my new gate, waiting, right on schedule. 5 construction trucks appeared, followed by Jack Wilson's shiny black SUV. Jack was Karen's right-hand man, the HOA vice president who did all her dirty work. The lead truck stopped at my gate. Jack got out of his SUV, his face turning redder with each step toward the barrier. "What is the meaning of this?" he shouted, rattling the gate. I stepped out of my truck, coffee mug in hand. "Morning, Jack. This is private property. This is the access road to a public works project. You can't block it." I took a sip of coffee. "Actually, I can. My lawyer confirmed this road belongs exclusively to me. It's not public, never was." Jack pulled out his phone. "I'm calling Karen right now." "Please do. And while you're at it, you might want to call your construction boss. All those workers are on the clock just sitting there." 20 minutes later, Karen's Mercedes screeched to a halt behind the line of construction trucks. She stormed toward my gate like a hurricane in designer boots. "Open this gate immediately," she demanded. "You are interfering with official town business." I handed her a copy of my property deed with the road highlighted. "This is my property, Karen. The stadium might be on land you stole from me, but this road, it's mine, fair and square. We'll get an emergency order. The mayor will what? Force me to let you use my private property. That's not how America works, Karen." 2 police cars pulled up. Officer Rodriguez approached, looking uncomfortable. I'd known him since high school. "We got calls about a disturbance," he said. Karen pointed at me. "She's blocking access to the community stadium project." "Arrest her." Officer Rodriguez examined my paperwork, made a few calls, then turned to Karen. "Ma'am, this appears to be a legally established private road. The owner has the right to restrict access." "This is ridiculous," Karen shouted. "There are contracts, deadlines, millions invested." "Perhaps you should have checked who owned the access road before building a stadium at the end of it?" I suggested calmly. Karen's phone rang. Her face fell as she listened to whoever was on the other end. "The construction company is threatening to charge us $5,000 per day for idle workers," she hissed after hanging up. "What do you want?" "I want my pasture back." "Impossible. Construction is almost complete." "Then I guess you've built a very expensive, very useless stadium that nobody can reach." By noon, a crowd had gathered. Emily Chun from the local newspaper was taking photos and interviewing people. Maria brought sandwiches for me and my supporters. Karen called an emergency town meeting for that evening. The community center was packed when I arrived with Sarah. Mayor Roberts looked nervous as he called for order. "We're here to address the access issue with the new Oak Ridge Community Stadium," he began. Karen took the microphone. "This woman is holding our community project hostage. We need to declare this a public road immediately." Sarah stepped forward. "Under what legal grounds? This road has been private property for over 70 years. "The greater good," Karen started. Emily Chun interrupted. "I'd like to project something for everyone to see." She connected her laptop to the projector. On the wall appeared the original property maps, side by side with the current construction plans. "The stadium sits here," Emily explained, pointing. "The only access road is here, running entirely through private property. According to county records, this road has never been public." Karen's face turned ghostly white as whispers filled the room. Mayor Roberts cleared his throat. "It seems there's been an oversight in the planning process." I stepped forward. "An oversight? You built $1 million stadium with no legal way to reach it. That's not an oversight. That's either incompetence or corruption." The room erupted in shouting. Homeowners from Oak Ridge Estates demanded answers about their HOA dues funding this disaster. Construction representatives worried about payment for work they couldn't complete. As chaos swirled around me, I felt strangely calm. For weeks, I'd been powerless against the HOA machine. Now, with one simple gate across my own road, I held all the cards. But as I watched Karen huddled with Jack and the mayor in an intense conversation, their eyes darting toward me with calculated looks, I knew this battle was far from over. What desperate move would they try next to steal what was rightfully mine? I gripped my coffee mug tightly, watching Karen's fancy SUV kick up dust as it sped down my driveway. She just stormed away after I refused her latest offer of $50,000 for road access to the stadium. Her face had turned an angry red when I said no. "This isn't over," she'd shouted before peeling away. My phone buzzed with a text from Maria. "You okay?" Saw Karen leaving, looked mad. I sighed and texted back, "I'm fine." She tried to buy me off again. 3 weeks had passed since I'd installed the gate across my private road. The massive stadium sat empty on what used to be my east pasture. Like a sleeping giant, nobody could reach. The HOA had spent nearly $2 million building it, and now they couldn't even use it. Karen tried everything to break me. First came the sweet talk and small offers. When that failed, she switched to threats. "We'll sue you for everything you've got," she had warned last week. "Go ahead," I'd replied calmly. "The deeds are clear. That road belongs to me, my lawyer." Sarah had confirmed it repeatedly. "They have no legal standing here," she assured me. "They built their stadium without securing proper access. That's on them, not you." The local newspaper ran a front-page story titled "Stadium Standoff." Emily Chun, the reporter, interviewed me at my kitchen table. "How does it feel, having the most powerful people in town against you?" she'd asked. I stirred my tea slowly. "Lonely sometimes, but also right. They took my land using fake documents. Why should I help them profit from their theft?" The article turned public opinion in my favor. People started leaving supportive notes in my mailbox. Some Oak Ridge residents even quietly admitted they were glad someone finally stood up to Karen and her rules. That afternoon, I drove into town for supplies and noticed people watching me. Some nodded respectfully, others whispered behind their hands. At the hardware store, Mr. Jenkins refused to let me pay. "On the house," he insisted. "My daddy lost his farm to developers 30 years ago. Wish he'd had your backbone." I thanked him with a lump in my throat. Back home, I found Richard Stevens waiting by my gate. He owned the property on the other side of Oak Ridge Estates. "Karen came to see me yesterday," he said, leaning against his truck. "Offered me big money to let them build a new access road through my south field." My stomach tightened. "What did you tell her?" Richard spat on the ground. "Told her to take a hike. I've seen how they treat neighbors. Today, you, tomorrow, me." Relief washed over me. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet," he warned. "She's calling in favors from the county commissioners. Talking about eminent domain." That night, I couldn't sleep. Eminent domain could force me to give up my road for public use. I called Sarah at midnight, apologizing for the late hour. "They'd need to prove genuine public necessity," she explained sleepily. "A private HOA stadium doesn't qualify, but Karen has connections, so we need to be ready." The next morning brought another surprise. A line of Oak Ridge residents gathered outside my gate. I approached cautiously, wondering if this was some kind of protest. A woman stepped forward. "I'm Diane Miller. We're homeowners who are sick of Karen's tyranny. She raised our HOA fees by 40% to pay for that monstrosity without a proper vote." "What do you want from me?" I asked. "Help," Diane replied. "We're trying to vote her out, but she's manipulating the bylaws. We need evidence of her misconduct to force an emergency election." I invited them in for lemonade on my porch, where they shared stories of Karen's bullying and rule-bending. By afternoon, we had a plan. The following days became a whirlwind of activity. I worked my farm during the day and met with the rebel homeowners at night. Emily published another article exposing how the HOA had exceeded its authority with the stadium project. Karen retaliated with a smear campaign, claiming I was holding the community hostage and preventing children from enjoying sports. She organized a protest outside my property, but only 20 people showed up, mostly her closest allies. One rainy Tuesday, I received a certified letter. The county was considering an emergency measure to declare my road a public thoroughfare. There would be a hearing in 2 weeks. "This is it," Sarah warned during our emergency meeting. "They're pulling out all the stops." I spent days gathering evidence, collecting testimonies from neighbors about the property dispute and Karen's tactics. Maria found old photographs proving the original boundary markers had been moved. 3 days before the hearing, Karen ambushed me at the grocery store. "Last chance," she hissed, cornering me near the frozen foods. "We need that stadium operational by fall. Name your price, or I'll make sure you lose everything." People nearby pretended not to listen, but I could see them watching. "It's not about money," I replied loudly enough for everyone to hear. "It's about respecting people's property and rights." "Don't be stupid," Karen snapped. "Nobody says no to me." "I just did," I answered, walking away with my head high. That evening, I received an unexpected visitor. Mayor Roberts himself stood at my door, looking uncomfortable. "May I come in?" he asked, removing his hat. Unofficially, I let him in, suspicious but curious. "I've been reviewing the original documents," he said, placing a folder on my table. "And I've had some concerning conversations with Karen that were recorded without my knowledge." My eyebrows shot up. "What kind of conversations? About falsifying boundary documents? About pressuring the county surveyor?" He looked genuinely troubled. "I got into politics to help people, not to steal from them." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. The mayor looked me straight in the eyes. "Because tomorrow Karen is presenting a proposal to the town council. She wants to use the stadium lease as leverage to eventually take your entire farm through progressive rezoning." My blood ran cold. "She can't do that. She thinks she can," he replied gravely. "And she might succeed unless someone stops her." As he left, he handed me a small voice recorder. "Meeting at 7:20 p.m. tomorrow. I never gave you this." I stood on my porch long after his car disappeared down the road, the recorder heavy in my hand. All this time, I thought I was just fighting for my road. Now I realized Karen wanted everything I had. What would I do if I lost not just a pasture, but my entire family legacy? I stood at the back of the packed town hall, my heart pounding in my chest. Every single seat was taken with people standing along the walls. I spotted Maria giving me a thumbs up from the third row. My palms felt sweaty as I clutched the folder of evidence we gathered. Tonight was my last chance to save my farm. Mayor Roberts banged his gavel. "The town council will now vote on declaring the farm access road a public necessity." Karen sat in the front row. Wearing a crisp blue suit and a smug smile, she turned and caught my eye, then made a little wave with her perfectly manicured fingers. She thought she'd already won. I took a deep breath and walked to the podium when my name was called. The microphone squealed, making several people cover their ears. "Sorry about that," I said, adjusting it lower. "Many of you have known me my whole life. My grandfather built that farm with his bare hands, and he taught me that hard work and honesty matter more than money or power." Karen sighed loudly and checked her watch. 3 months ago, bulldozers showed up on my east pasture without warning. When I questioned this, I was shown papers claiming that land wasn't mine anymore. "But those papers aren't real," whispers rippled through the crowd. Mayor Roberts leaned forward. "That's a serious accusation," he said. "Do you have proof?" I nodded and pulled out the first document. Emily Chun from the HOA Tragedies helped me track down the original property maps from 1967. I held them up. "These show my grandfather's full property lines, including the disputed pasture." Karen jumped to her feet. "Those maps were legally updated when the boundary dispute was settled." "Really?" I asked. "Then why couldn't anyone find records of this settlement at the county office? And why did the clerk tell me someone had recently requested those specific files be moved to secure storage?" More murmurs from the crowd. Karen's face flushed red. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "We have a multi-million-dollar stadium that needs to open in 3 weeks. The road issue needs to be settled tonight." Mayor Roberts banged his gavel again. Please sit down, Mrs. Thompson, I continued, my voice stronger now. This isn't just about a road or a stadium. It's about whether we let powerful people take whatever they want from those with less influence. Suddenly, Richard Stevens stood up from his seat near the back. Richard rarely spoke at town meetings, and everyone turned to look at him. I have something to say, he announced. Karen rolled her eyes. Oh. Please, Richard, sit down. Richard walked slowly to the front. Leaning on his cane, at 78, he was one of our town's oldest residents and most respected citizens. He'd served as town judge for over 30 years before retiring. Last month, Karen Thompson and Jack Wilson came to my property, Richard said, his voice thin but clear. They wanted to build an alternative access road through my land after our friend here blocked the original road. He pulled out his phone. I've learned to keep recordings of important conversations. My doctor says my memory isn't what it used to be. He tapped the screen and Karen's voice filled the room. Once we get that road declared public, Karen's recorded voice said, we'll use it as leverage to get the whole farm. The mayor already promised to help with eminent domain if we donate part of the property for that wildlife sanctuary he's always talking about. Gasps erupted around the room. Mayor Roberts's face turned white. There's more, Richard continued, tapping again. Those boundary documents were a pain to deal with. Karen's voice continued. Do you know how much I had to pay that clerk to lose the original maps? But it'll be worth it when we develop that entire property. The HOA stands to make millions. The room exploded into chaos. People shouted questions at Karen, who stood frozen at her seat. Mayor Roberts pounded his gavel repeatedly, calling for order. These recordings need to be verified. The mayor finally shouted over the noise. This meeting is suspended until we can investigate these serious allegations. Karen grabbed her purse and rushed toward the exit, pushing past me. You'll regret this, she hissed. This isn't over. But it was, within a week. The county launched a formal investigation. They discovered altered documents, missing records, and evidence of bribes paid to county employees. Karen and Jack were both charged with fraud and tampering with public records. The HOA board was dissolved and reformed with new leadership. Maria was elected as the new president, promising better relations with surrounding properties. 4 weeks later, I stood watching as workers removed the Oak Ridge Community Stadium sign. The new sign read Oak Ridge Farmers Market and Community Center. The town council had voted unanimously to restore my east pasture and compensate me for damages. In return, I agreed to allow limited access to my road for the new community center with strict guidelines on hours and traffic. As the workers finished hanging the new sign, a familiar blue Mercedes pulled up. Karen stepped out, looking different without her designer clothes and perfect hair. She walked toward me slowly. I wanted to say this face to face, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. I'm sorry. I got caught up in what the development could be worth, and I stopped seeing you as a person with rights. I studied her face, looking for signs of the old Karen, the manipulative, entitled woman who tried to steal my land. But all I saw was someone who'd lost everything. Her position, her reputation, her freedom pending trial. I appreciate you saying that, I replied. I hope you find a way to make things right. She nodded and walked back to her car. Maria joined me as I watched Karen drive away. Do you believe her? She asked. I'm not sure, I said honestly. But I believe people can change when they face real consequences. We turned to watch families already gathering for the first day of the new farmers market. Local vendors were setting up booths to sell vegetables, crafts, and baked goods. Children ran playing across what used to be stadium parking, now transformed into a community garden and playground. You know what my grandfather always said about land? I asked Maria as we walked toward the market. What's that? He said, land is never just about property. It's about roots and rights, and standing your ground when it matters. Maria smiled and handed me a basket. Well, you certainly proved that. Now, Let's go sell some of those famous tomatoes of yours. As we walked toward my booth, I noticed Emily Chun taking photographs for the newspaper. She waved and hurried over. I just got word from my editor, she said excitedly. That story I wrote about your fight with the HOA has been picked up by national news. They're calling it a classic David versus Goliath story. Really? I asked, surprised. Emily nodded. They want to interview you next week, apparently. HOAs overstepping their boundaries is a huge issue across the country. Your story might help other people stand up for their rights. I looked around at what we'd created, not just saved my farm, but built something better for everyone. My small victory might help others facing the same fight. I'll do it, I told Emily. After all, sometimes the most important roads we protect aren't just the ones on our land, but the ones that lead to justice for everyone